The Marrow Thief. Part 1. The Bone Markets. The city of Ashenmere had been dead for 300 years, but it refused to stop moving. I watched from the crumbling balcony of the flayed Goat Inn as the morning procession wound through the street of remembrance. The Hollow, that's what we called them, shuffled in their thousands, pale forms wrapped in the tattered remnants of nobility. They didn't breathe, didn't blink, but they moved with purpose, heading toward the bone markets in the city's rotten heart. My name is Kael, and I'm a thief. Not the romantic kind who steals jewels and kisses from rich merchants' daughters. I steal marrow, life essence, the stuff that keeps the hollow walking and the rich living forever. "You're up early," croaked a voice behind me. Yenna limped onto the balcony, her prosthetic leg clicking against stone. She'd lost the real one 5 years ago in the deep vaults. Lost it along with half our crew and whatever innocence we'd brought down into the dark. "Couldn't sleep," I said, not turning from the view. "Too many ghosts." "Ghosts?" Yenna laughed, a sound like grinding rust. "In Ashenmere, the ghosts are the least of our problems. At least they have the decency to stay dead." She had a point. In most cities, when you die, that's it. Darkness, peace, whatever gods there are take you away. But here, in Ashenmere, death was just another form of employment. The Hollow worked the factories, manned the walls, and served the Marrow Lords, the 13 families who discovered the secret of immortality. And where there's immortality, there's always someone like me, ready to steal it. "Got a job," Yenna said, tossing a sealed letter onto the balcony railing. The wax seal was black with a silver serpent, the mark of House Vetherin, one of the most powerful Marrow Lord families. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it. Heavy parchment, expensive ink. This wasn't a job from the usual fence or desperate merchant. "They want to hire us?" I asked, incredulous. "The Marrow Lords?" "Not all of them," Yenna corrected. "Just Lady Vetherin. Seems she has a delicate problem that requires someone with our particular skills." I broke the seal and read. The words were flowery, full of honorifics and meaningless pleasantries, but the core message was clear. Lady Vetherin wanted us to steal something from House Malachar, her greatest rival. Not gold, not secrets, a soul. "This is insane," I muttered, reading it again to make sure I understood correctly. "She wants us to steal a living soul from a Marrow Lord's vault. That's not just dangerous, it's impossible." Yenna finished. "That's what they said about the deep vaults too. Didn't stop us from trying. And look how that turned out." I gestured to her leg. She shrugged. "I'm still here, still breathing. That's more than I can say for Torvin, Mesh, and poor little Pip." The names hung in the air between us like accusations. Our old crew, my old friends, all dead because I'd been arrogant enough to think I could outsmart the traps in the deep vaults, the ancient catacombs beneath Ashenmere where the first Marrow Lords had supposedly discovered their dark art. "The pay is 50 marrow vials," Yenna said quietly. "Pure essence. Enough to buy passage out of Ashenmere for both of us. Enough to start over somewhere clean. Somewhere the dead stay buried. 50 vials. That was a fortune. More than we'd make in 10 years of regular work. Enough to leave this cursed city and never look back." I looked out at the Hollow again, at their endless procession. Somewhere among them might be people I'd known. People who'd died and been brought back, their souls hollowed out to fuel someone else's immortality. "When does she want it done?" I asked. Yenna smiled, showing teeth filed to points, a fashion from her days running with the rust gangs. 3 days from now, during the Feast of Ash." The Feast of Ash. The one night of the year when all 13 Marrow Lord houses gathered in the grand ossuary to celebrate their victory over death. Security would be complex. We'll need help, I said. Real help. Not street muscle. I know someone, Yenna replied. A hollow who still remembers. Calls herself Maven. She used to be a lockbreaker before she died. Now she works for House Malakar. A hollow. I turned to stare at her. You want to trust our lives to one of the walking dead? She's not like the others. Something went wrong when they harvested her soul. She kept pieces, memories, will. She's been playing dead for 2 years, waiting for a chance to escape. I thought about it. A hollow who could think, who could plan, who had access to House Malakar's estate. It could work. Or it could be a trap. Set up a meeting, I said finally. But we do it my way. Neutral ground. Lots of exits. And if I don't like the smell of it, we walk. Deal. Yenna extended her hand. I shook it, sealing our fate. We met Maven in the ruins of the old cathedral, a structure so ancient even the Marrow Lords avoided it. They said it predated Ashenmere, that it belonged to a civilization that had fallen before the city's founding. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, not in the way that sharp light hurts, but in a deeper way, like they were cutting into something behind your eyes. Maven was waiting in the nave, standing perfectly still. She looked like any other hollow, pale skin, hollow eyes, the faint shimmer of preservation spells keeping her from rotting. But when she moved, it was different, purposeful, alive. Kael, she said, and her voice had texture to it, emotion. The hollow didn't have that. Yenna tells me you're planning something ambitious. That depends, I replied, keeping my distance. Are you really Maven, or just a very good puppet? She smiled, and it was sad in a way that no hollow could fake. I'm what's left of her. When they harvested my soul, they were careless, rushed. House Malakar was pushing their soul binders to meet quotas, so they took most of me, but not all. Why help us? I asked. What do you get out of this? Maven walked closer, and I saw her eyes weren't completely empty. There were flecks of blue in them, like fragments of sky trapped in ice. The soul you're stealing, she said. It belongs to Ceres Vel. She was my daughter. House Malakar took her 3 months ago, bound her soul into a vessel and locked it in their vaults. I want you to take her, and I want you to destroy the vessel. Set her free. The air in the cathedral seemed to grow colder. If we destroy the vessel, Yenna said slowly, the soul dies, properly dies. No resurrection. No second chances. I know, Maven said, but anything is better than what they have planned. Ceres was an artist, a painter. She made beauty in a city of death, and they're going to use her essence to extend Lord Malakar's life by another decade. She'll be burned away slowly, feeling everything, until there's nothing left but screaming emptiness. I'd heard stories about what happened to souls in the vessels, how the Marrow Lords didn't just use them for life extension, but experienced them, lived through their memories, fed on their emotions. It was worse than death. It was consumption. All right, I said. We'll free your daughter. But you need to get us into House Malakar. Not just inside, into the vaults themselves. Maven nodded. I can do that. I'm assigned to the deep vaults during the feast. While the Lords feast above, I'll be below, maintaining the preservation wards. I can disable the primary security and give you a window. 15 minutes. After that, The wards reset, and anyone inside is trapped until morning. 15 minutes, I repeated, to break into a Marrow Lord's vault, steal a soul vessel, and escape. That's tight. That's why you're getting paid 50 vials, Yenna pointed out. 45, I corrected. 5 goes to Maven. For her daughter. Maven looked at me with those fragmentary blue eyes. I don't need marrow. I'm already dead. Then buy flowers, I said. Put them on your daughter's grave once we free her. That's payment enough. For a long moment, Maven just stared. Then she nodded, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't expected to see in a hollow. Gratitude. Part 2. The Feast of Ash. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Yenna and I mapped out every approach to House Malakar's estate, every escape route, every contingency. We acquired tools, lockpicks made from bone that wouldn't trigger ward alarms, smoke pellets that could confuse the hollow guards, and a single vial of condensed shadow essence that would hide us from magical detection for exactly 3 minutes. We also visited the black market alchemists who operated in the dregs, the lowest level of Ashenmere where the poor and desperate lived. There we bought 3 doses of Deathwalker's draft, a poison so potent it could stop your heart for 5 minutes, making you appear dead to even magical inspection. It was our emergency exit. If caught, we'd take the draft and hope to be thrown out with the other corpses. Hope. Such a fragile thing in a city of the dead. The night of the feast arrived with an unseasonable chill. Ashenmere's perpetual fog grew thicker, and the bells of the grand ossuary rang out across the city, calling the Marrow Lords to celebration. Yenna and I dressed as hollow servants, grey robes, blank masks, shuffling gait. Maven had provided us with enchanted tokens that would fool casual inspection. They wouldn't hold up to serious scrutiny, but servants were beneath the notice of the lords. We joined the procession of hollow heading toward House Malakar's estate, a sprawling complex of black iron and white marble that squatted in the noble quarter like a cancerous growth. The main building was 7 stories tall, each level representing a different aspect of the soul that could be harvested. Memory, emotion, will, sensation, creation, identity, and at the very top, essence, the core of what made a person real. The vaults were below. Always below. The entrance was chaos, hundreds of hollow being directed by shouting overseers, loading carts with delicacies for the feast, carrying wine barrels that probably cost more than most citizens earned in a lifetime. We slipped into the flow, just 2 more faceless servants in a sea of the dead. Maven was waiting inside the service entrance, exactly where she'd promised. She acknowledged us with the briefest nod, then turned and walked deeper into the estate. We followed. The corridors of House Malakar were a study in contrasts. Above, where the living resided, everything was opulent. Gold leaf, silk tapestries, floors so polished you could see your reflection. But as we descended, the decoration faded. The walls became rough stone. The air grew cold and stale. We passed other hollow, but they paid us no attention. Maven had been right. The dead didn't care about the dead. Finally, we reached a door of black iron covered in chains. This was the entrance to the deep vaults. Maven pulled out a key, not a physical one, but something that looked like crystallized moonlight, and touched it to the lock. The chains began to unwind. "Once you're inside," Maven whispered, her voice barely audible, "go to the 3rd level. The soul vessels are kept in the Chamber of Echoes. Saris will be in a jade container, marked with her birth name. You'll know it when you see it." "What about the guards?" Yenna asked. "There are no guards," Maven said. "Only traps. The Marrow Lords don't trust the living with their treasures. They trust mechanisms, curses, things that can't be bribed or blackmailed." The chains fell away completely, and the door swung open, revealing a staircase that descended into absolute darkness. 15 minutes, Maven reminded us. Starting now. We descended. The darkness was total. Not the natural darkness of night, but something deeper, a darkness that seemed to drink light, to swallow it and leave nothing behind. I pulled out a soul light, a small orb that glowed with captured essence, and its illumination was weak and sickly. The stairs went down much farther than should have been possible. I counted 300 steps before we reached the first level. The walls here were carved with faces, thousands of them, each unique, each frozen in an expression of horror or ecstasy or desperate plea. "Don't touch them," I warned Yenna. "Don't even look too closely." She nodded, but I saw her hand drift to one of the faces, a young boy with eyes that seemed to follow our movement. "Yenna, I know," she snapped. "I know. It's just. He looks like my brother. Before the plague took him. That's what they want you to think. The faces show you what will hurt most. It's a trap." We pressed on, moving faster now. Our 15 minutes were ticking away. The second level was worse. Here the floor was transparent, and beneath it we could see things. Bodies, maybe, or the idea of bodies. They shifted and writhed, pressing up against the glass like fish in a tank, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. "Keep moving," I said, focusing straight ahead. "Don't stop. Don't." Yenna gasped. I turned to see her staring down through the floor, her face gone pale. "Yenna, what?" "It's them," she whispered. "Torvin, Mesh, Pip. They're down there. They're trapped down there." I looked. The faces in the floor had changed, and yes, I saw them too. Our old crew. The friends we'd lost in the deep vaults years ago. They were reaching up, mouthing our names. "It's not real," I said firmly, grabbing Yenna's arm. "They're dead. This place feeds on guilt and shows you what you fear most. But what if it is real?" Yenna's voice cracked. "What if they've been here all along, suffering, while we just moved on?" I didn't have an answer to that. So instead I pulled her forward, forcing her to walk, one step at a time, until we crossed into the third level. The Chamber of Echoes. It was a vast circular room, its walls lined with thousands of vessels. Glass, jade, obsidian, crystal. Each container held a soul, and each soul generated a sound. The chamber was full of whispers, sighs, screams, laughter, all blending into a chorus that threatened to overwhelm the senses. "Find the jade container," I said, trying to focus. "Look for the birth name." We split up, each taking a section of the wall. The vessels were labeled, but many of the labels were written in the old script, the language the Marrow Lords used for their most precious possessions. I was scanning the third shelf when I heard Yenna call out. "Found it! Kael, I found." Her voice cut off. I ran to her position and found her standing before a jade vessel about the size of a human heart. It pulsed with internal light, and inside I could see something. A form. A presence. It was beautiful and terrible at once. But that's not what had silenced Yenna. Standing next to her, one hand resting possessively on the vessel, was Lord Malakar himself. He was ancient, older than the city, with skin like yellowed parchment stretched over prominent bones. His eyes were completely black, filled with the concentrated essence of 100 stolen souls. He smiled, revealing teeth of polished silver. "Thieves," he said, and his voice was like the rustling of dead leaves. "How delightful! It's been so long since I had fresh criminals to work with." I reached for the shadow essence vial, but Malakar moved faster than should have been possible. One moment he was by the vessel, the next he was in front of me, his hand around my throat, lifting me off the ground. "That won't work here, boy," he said. "This chamber is warded against all forms of concealment. Did you really think you could just walk in and steal from me?" Yenna drew a knife, a stupid move, but brave. She lunged at Malachar, aiming for his heart. He caught the blade between 2 fingers without looking. "And you must be Yenna Crest," he said pleasantly. "The legless thief. I've been wondering when you'd work up the courage to try this. Maven was so certain you would. She's been very useful, telling me everything about your little plan." My blood turned to ice. Maven. She'd betrayed us. Why? Yenna demanded. Why set us up? Malachar released my throat, letting me drop to the floor. I gasped for air, my vision swimming. "Because I needed to test something," he explained, walking back to the jade vessel. "You see, I've been experimenting with a new technique. Instead of simply consuming souls, I've been learning to blend them, merge them together into something new, something more powerful." He picked up the vessel containing Ceres's soul. "Young Ceres here is special, a creative soul, brimming with artistic passion. But passion alone is limited. It needs tempering. It needs the cold logic of a thief's mind, the desperate will to survive. It needs you too." Understanding hit me like a physical blow. "You're going to put us in there with her. Merge our souls together." "Precisely." Malachar clapped his hands like a delighted child. 3 souls woven together, creating something unprecedented. The artist's vision, the thief's cunning, the cripple's determination. I'll consume the result slowly, savoring every nuance. It will sustain me for decades. Yenna spat blood. Maven wouldn't do this. Her daughter volunteered, Malachar interrupted. "Oh, Maven doesn't know that. But Ceres came to me willingly. She wanted to be immortalized, to have her art live forever. She just didn't understand the form that immortality would take." He moved toward us, his fingers already beginning to glow with soul-binding magic. "This will hurt," he said, almost apologetically. "The merging process is imperfect. Parts of you will be scraped away, burned out. But what remains will be exquisite." The magical bindings wrapped around me like chains of cold fire. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This was it. This was how I died. Not fighting, not running, but helpless on the floor of a vault, about to be turned into food for an immortal monster. Then I heard a sound. A low, mournful note, like a bell tolling underwater. The jade vessel in Malachar's hand cracked. "What?" The Marrow Lord's eyes widened. "No, that's impossible. The containment should." The vessel shattered. Light exploded from it, brilliant and terrible. Not the cold essence light of the soul lights, but something warm, alive. It took form, a woman's shape, transparent and glowing, with eyes of pure flame. Ceres! But she wasn't hollow anymore. She was full, complete, and absolutely furious. "You lied to me." Her voice shook the chamber, and vessels all along the walls began to crack in sympathy. "You said I would live forever. You said my art would endure." Malachar stumbled backward. You shouldn't be conscious. The binding should have." "The binding was flawed," another voice said. Maven stepped out of the shadows. Not the shuffling hollow servant, but something else. Something that glowed with the same light as Ceres. "You were careless with me, Lord Malachar," Maven said. "You let me keep pieces, memories. And I learned. I studied your techniques. I found the flaws." She raised her hands, and the light around Ceres intensified. "My daughter was an artist. She knew how to see patterns, how to find beauty in chaos. When you put her in that vessel, you didn't realize. She could see the structure of the binding. She understood it better than you ever did." Ceres's form expanded, and I felt the magical chains around me begin to dissolve. "Together," Maven said, "we've been unpicking your work. Every soul you've imprisoned here, we've been loosening their bonds, waiting for the right moment." Malakar's face twisted in rage. "I'll destroy you both. You'll do nothing," Maven said quietly, and then every vessel in the chamber shattered at once. The sound was catastrophic. Thousands of souls, freed simultaneously, erupted into the chamber like a tidal wave of light and rage and desperate joy. They swirled around Malakar, around us, around everything. The Marrow Lords screamed. The souls were tearing at him, pulling at the stolen essence that made up his immortality. I saw his skin begin to crack, light bleeding through. "Run!" Maven shouted at us. "The wards are collapsing. You have seconds." Yenna grabbed my arm and hauled me up. We ran, stumbling toward the stairs as the chamber began to collapse. Behind us, I heard Malakar's screams turn liquid, then fade entirely. The souls followed us up, a river of light flowing through the vault. They weren't hostile. They were celebrating. Free. Finally free. We burst out into the main estate to find chaos. The freed souls had spread through the entire complex, and the Marrow Lords were fleeing in panic as their carefully hoarded immortality crumbled around them. Maven and Ceres appeared beside us, their forms already beginning to fade. "Thank you," Maven said, "for trying, for being willing to free her, even when you thought I'd betrayed you." "I did betray you," I pointed out. "This was all your plan." She smiled. "Yes, but you didn't know that. Your intentions were pure. That matters." Ceres's form had become almost transparent now. "Tell the world," she said, her voice fading. "Tell them what the Marrow Lords really are. Tell them the dead deserve rest." And then they were gone, dissolved into light, finally at peace. Part 3. The Reckoning. The collapse of House Malakar triggered a chain reaction across Ashenmere. When one Marrow Lord fell, others scrambled to claim his assets, his territory, his remaining soul vessels. But the freed souls had spread like wildfire, and they weren't done. Every vault, every house, every secret cache where the Marrow Lords kept their stolen immortality, the souls found them. They tore through wards and locks, freed their fellow prisoners, and in 3 days of chaos, the power structure that had ruled Ashenmere for 300 years crumbled to dust. Yenna and I watched from the flayed goat as the grand ossuary burned. The 13 families were fighting among themselves now, accusing each other of the catastrophe, forming and breaking alliances by the hour. "We should leave," Yenna said, "while everything's in chaos. We could just walk away." I thought about that, about leaving Ashenmere behind, finding some quiet village where the dead stayed dead and magic was just stories told to frighten children. "We could," I agreed. "But what about them?" I gestured to the streets below, where Hollow was standing still, confused. Many had begun to collapse, the preservation magic that animated them failing without the Marrow Lord's constant maintenance. But others were moving differently, purposefully, like Maven had. "Some of them are waking up," I said, "like Maven did. They're remembering who they were." "That's impossible," Yenna protested. "Soul harvesting is absolute. You can't reverse it." Maybe not completely. But if Maven kept pieces, others might have too. The soul isn't like water you can pour out completely. It's more like roots growing through soil. You can cut them, but fragments remain. Below us, a hollow woman was crying. Actually crying, tears running down pale cheeks as she stared at her hands like she was seeing them for the first time in years. We could help them, I said. The waking hollow. Help them remember. Help them reclaim whatever pieces of themselves remain. Yenna was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, that rusty sound I'd come to know so well. We're thieves, Kael, not saviors. Why can't we be both? She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. All right, she said finally, but we're still keeping that payment from Lady Vetherin. We earned it. I pulled out the sealed case Lady Vetherin had delivered that morning, true to her word despite the chaos. Inside were 50 vials of pure marrow essence, glowing with stolen life. We could use this to buy our way out, I said. Or we could use it to help the Hollow, Yenna finished. Return it to them. Give them back some of what was stolen. I looked at the vials, at the distilled essence of who knew how many people. Then I thought of Maven and Ceres, dissolving into light. At peace. Let's do both, I decided. Help who we can. Then leave. Together. Yenna extended her hand, not to shake, but palm up, waiting. I placed my hand over hers. Partners, I said. Partners, she agreed. In theft, in redemption, and whatever comes after. Below us, more Hollow were waking, crying, screaming, laughing, remembering what it meant to be alive. It would be chaos. It would be dangerous. Many wouldn't make it. The shock of sudden consciousness after years of hollow existence would be too much for some. But some would survive. Some would rebuild. Some would learn to live again. And we would help them. Not because we were heroes. Not because we were good. But because in a city of the dead, sometimes the greatest rebellion is choosing to be alive. Part 4. The Awakening. The first week after the collapse was pure chaos. Without the Marrow Lords' magic maintaining them, thousands of Hollow simply ceased. They stopped mid-step, mid-task, and crumbled to dust. The streets of Ashenmere became carpeted with ash and bone fragments, the physical remains of those who'd been slaves for so long they had nothing left to return to. But others, a surprising number, survived. Yenna and I set up a refuge in the abandoned Chapel of Silent Saints, one of the few religious buildings the Marrow Lords had left standing, probably because they found it amusing. We used half the marrow essence to create a stabilization ward, a field that would help newly conscious Hollow adjust to awareness without the shock killing them. They came in dozens at first, then hundreds. The waking dead, stumbling through the streets, drawn by some instinct to the one place in Ashenmere that offered hope instead of exploitation. I'll never forget the first one who spoke. Her name had been Lyris. She'd been a baker before her death, killed in a factory accident 12 years ago. House Vetherin had raised her the same day, put her to work in their textile mills. When consciousness returned, she stood in the chapel's doorway, trembling, tears streaming down her pale face. "I remember bread," she whispered. "The smell of bread baking. My mother's hands kneading dough. I remember. Gods, I remember everything." She collapsed, and we caught her. Over the next hours, the memories continued to surface, a lifetime of experiences flooding back into a mind that had been hollow for over a decade. She screamed. She laughed. She wept. And finally, she slept. Real sleep. Not the standing dormancy of the hollow, but actual rest. When she woke, Her eyes had color again. Faint, like watercolor on wet paper, but there. Brown, like rich earth. "What do I do now?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. None of us did. But a hollow man named Greaves, who'd been a carpenter before his death, spoke up. "We rebuild," he said simply. "We make something new. We've been given a second chance, a real one this time. We don't waste it." And so they did. The Hollow who retained consciousness began to organize. They took over the empty estates of the fallen Marrow Lords, not to live in luxury, but to convert them into community halls, workshops, homes for those who had nowhere else to go. Greaves led a team that began tearing down the factories. "We were slaves in death," he declared. "We won't be slaves in this new life." Lyris started a bakery, the first real bakery in Ashenmere in 3 centuries. The smell of fresh bread drew people from across the city, both the waking Hollow and the living poor who'd always existed in the shadow of the Marrow Lords. But not everyone was happy with the changes. The remaining Marrow Lords, 7 of the original 13 families survived in some form, retreated to the upper districts and fortified their positions. They still had wealth, weapons, and some soul-bound servants who hadn't woken or who chose to remain loyal out of fear. Lady Vetherin sent me a message 2 weeks after the collapse. It was delivered by a child, a living child, thin and desperate, who probably needed the coin more than I needed the message. "The lady wishes to thank you," the child recited in a monotone that suggested they'd been drilled on the words. "Your actions have simplified certain political situations. However, she advises discretion going forward. Not all changes are welcome." It was a warning and a threat wrapped in courtesy. "Tell Lady Vetherin," I said, handing the child 3 silver coins, more than the message was worth, "that I appreciate her concern, but I'm retired from that line of work." The child's eyes widened at the coins. They pocketed them quickly and ran. Yenna had been listening from the doorway. "You know she won't accept that." "I know," I admitted. "But maybe she'll wait. Maybe she'll realize that the world has changed and she needs to change with it. And if she doesn't?" I looked at the case of remaining marrow vials, 25 still unused. Each one represented years of stolen life. Enough power to level a building. Enough to kill a Marrow Lord. "Then we remind her why it's a bad idea to hire thieves," I said. "We know where all the bodies are buried." Literally. The confrontation came a month later. Lady Vetherin's forces, 50 soul-bound warriors and a dozen living mercenaries, marched on the chapel at dawn. They came in formation, disciplined and deadly, led by the lady herself in armor of black steel and bone. We'd known it was coming. The waking Hollow had eyes everywhere in the city now, and loyalty bought with kindness ran deeper than loyalty bought with fear. When Vetherin reached the chapel, she found it empty. No refugees. No defenders. Just me and Yenna, sitting on the front steps, sharing a bottle of wine. "Kael," Lady Vetherin said, her voice amplified by magic. "Your rebellion ends today. Surrender, and I'll make your deaths quick." "That's generous," I called back. "But I have a counter-offer." I held up a single marrow vial. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. "Pure essence. Concentrated life. Enough power to do incredible things." Vetherin's eyes narrowed behind her helmet. "If you're planning to use that as a weapon, you'll only succeed in killing yourself. Marrow detonation is unstable." "I know," I agreed. "But I'm not planning to detonate it. I'm planning to give it back." I opened the vial and poured it onto the ground. The effect was immediate. The essence soaked into the stone, into the earth beneath the chapel, and began to spread. Like roots, like veins, like life returning to dead soil. All across Ashenmere, I felt it happen. Every hollow who'd woken, every freed soul that had chosen to linger, they felt it too. The essence flowing into the city's foundation, into the bones of Ashenmere itself. And the dead city began to wake. Not violently, not explosively, but the ground trembled, and from every crack in the pavement, every gap between stones, green things began to grow. Grass, flowers, vines, plants that had no business existing in a city of death and ash. Vetherin's soldiers stumbled backward, uncertain. "What have you done?" Vetherin demanded. "I've given Ashenmere back its soul," I said. "All those vials, all that stolen essence, we've been returning it. Not to individuals, they're gone, but to the city itself, to the earth, to life." The vines were growing faster now, wrapping around buildings, pulling down the iron decorations and bone ornaments that marked the Marrow Lords' dominion. Not destroying, but reclaiming, transforming. "You've doomed us all," Vetherin hissed. "Without the essence, without the immortality, we're just human," Yenna finished. "You're just human, like everyone else. Welcome to mortality, Lady Vetherin. It's terrifying and beautiful and painfully brief. Enjoy it while you can." Vetherin's soldiers were deserting now, backing away from the growing vegetation. Some were tearing off their armor, staring in wonder at flowers blooming from cracks in the pavement. The lady herself stood frozen, and I saw something I'd never expected to see in a Marrow Lord's face. Fear, not of death. She'd conquered death centuries ago. Fear of life, of change, of a world she couldn't control. "This isn't over," she said finally, turning to leave. Her voice was smaller now, without the magical amplification. Just a woman's voice. "We'll find other ways, other sources. The Marrow Lords have survived worse than this." "Maybe," I allowed. "But you'll do it without Ashenmere's help. This city belongs to the living now. All of them." She left, her remaining soldiers following. They looked back over their shoulders at the greening city, at the impossible garden growing from death. When they were gone, Yenna let out a long breath. "We actually did it," she said. "We freed a city." "We gave them a chance," I corrected. "What they do with it is up to them." From behind us, I heard footsteps. Lyris, Greaves, and dozens of other waking hollow emerged from hiding places around the chapel. "That was incredibly risky," Greaves said, but he was smiling. "If Vetherin had called your bluff about the vials." "It wasn't a bluff," I interrupted. "We really did pour them all into the city. Every last drop." Lyris knelt and touched one of the new flowers, a small blue thing with petals like silk. "I remember these," she whispered. "They grew in my mother's garden. I haven't seen them in, gods, decades." "The city remembers too," I said. "Every person who lived here, every plant that grew, every moment of beauty before the Marrow Lords, it's all still here, written into the stones, the soil, the bones of the place. We just had to remind it how to grow." Over the following weeks, the transformation continued. Ashenmere, the city of death, became something new. Not alive, not in the way other cities were alive. There was still too much history, too much darkness woven into its foundation. But it was healing. The Waking Hollow established a council. They invited living citizens to join, creating the first truly mixed government the city had ever known. There were arguments, setbacks, moments when old prejudices threatened to tear apart the fragile peace. But they persisted. Greaves designed new buildings that incorporated the growing vines rather than fighting them. Lyriss's bakery expanded into a marketplace where both living and waking hollow could trade. Artists decorated the old execution squares with murals celebrating life, death, and rebirth. And Yenna and I, we kept our promise to each other. We used our skills, not for theft anymore, but for finding things. Lost heirlooms that could bring closure to families. Hidden caches of pre-Marrow Lord artwork. Secrets that, when revealed, helped people understand their own history. We became archaeologists of sorts. Diggers in ruins. Finders of lost things. One evening, 6 months after Vetherin's failed assault, we stood on the roof of the old chapel, looking out over Ashenmere as the sun set. The city had never had sunsets before. The perpetual fog had always obscured the sky. But now, with life returning, the fog was lifting, revealing colors we'd thought lost forever. "Do you ever regret it?" Yenna asked. "Giving up the vials? We could have been rich, powerful. We could have left." I thought about it honestly. "No," I said finally. "We could have left as thieves with stolen goods. Instead, we stayed as people who helped change the world. I know which one I prefer, even if it means we're stuck here, in a city that's still figuring out how to not be dead. Especially then," I said, "because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to make sure they don't forget why the Marrow Lords fell. Why immortality at the cost of others' souls is always wrong." Yenna was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, not her usual rusty laugh, but something softer. "You know what the scary part is," she said. "I think you might be right. I think we might actually be making a difference." "Is that so scary?" "Terrifying," she admitted. "Because it means we have to keep doing it. We can't just stop and say, 'Well, job done,' and walk away. There's always more work. Always more people who need help." "Welcome to having a purpose," I said. "It's exhausting, but worth it." I looked at the city below, at the children playing in vine-covered streets, at the hollow and living working together to repair old buildings, at the flowers growing from every crack and crevice. "Yeah," I said. "Worth it." Epilogue. The Marrow Thief's last theft. 5 years passed. Ashenmere became known throughout the land not as the City of Death, but as the City of Second Chances. People came from across the continent, both living and hollow fleeing from other Marrow Lord territories, seeking refuge. The Council of the Waking, as they called themselves, established laws protecting both the living and the dead. The distinction between them became less important over time. What mattered was contribution, community, the willingness to build rather than tear down. The remaining Marrow Lords retreated to their fortified enclaves in the mountains, bitter and diminished. Lady Vetherin was among them, her house reduced to a shadow of its former glory. They plotted revenge, schemed for a return to power, but the world had moved on without them. Yenna died in the spring of the 5th year. Not violently, just age, finally catching up to her. She went peacefully in her sleep, her prosthetic leg propped in the corner of her small room. I found her in the morning and wasn't surprised to see her sitting up, transparent and glowing, still in the bed. "Well," she said, looking down at her ghostly hands, "this is unexpected. You're staying?" I asked. She shrugged. "Seems I have unfinished business. Plus look." She extended her legs, and I saw that both were whole now, ethereal but complete. "I got my leg back. Would be a shame to waste it." Over the following months, more of the dead chose to linger. Not as hollow. They weren't animated corpses, but conscious spirits who decided the world still needed them. They became advisors, teachers, guardians. The living learned to see them not as servants or tools, but as partners who'd crossed the boundary of death and chosen to return. Ashenmere developed its own unique culture, a blend of life and afterlife, where the barrier between states of being became permeable, negotiable. And I kept working, finding things, solving mysteries, helping people, until the day I woke up and found my own hands had become transparent. I died in the night, heart failure, the healer said later. Quick, painless, the way everyone hopes to go. But I hadn't left. Yenna was waiting in my room, grinning her rusty grin. Couldn't resist, could you? She said. Always have to steal one more thing, even if it's your own death. I looked at my ghostly hands, feeling the strange lightness of being unbound from flesh. I have work to finish, I said. We both do, Yenna agreed. Come on. Greaves found something in the old archives. Something that might be the location of another Marrow Lord cache. Lots of stolen souls that need freeing. I followed her out into the streets of Ashenmere, now verdant with life and filled with the laughter of children, both living and the children of the waking hollow, who were learning to reproduce in their own way, creating new souls rather than stealing old ones. You know, I said as we walked, I used to steal marrow to survive, to escape, to get rich. And now? Yenna asked. Now I steal it to give it back, to free it, to make sure no one suffers what we suffered. The marrow thief, Yenna said with a laugh, who steals from death itself. Partner, I corrected. We steal from death. Together. She smiled and took my hand, both of us transparent, both of us dead, both of us more alive than we'd ever been. Together, she agreed. And we walked into the green streets of Ashenmere, two ghosts among many, still working, still fighting, still stealing from those who thought death gave them the right to rule life. The Marrow Lords would learn, eventually, that you can't keep death chained forever. It always finds a way to break free. And when it does, it brings the thieves with it. Interlude, the archive of stolen names. 3 years into my death. Strange how I counted time now, as if dying was just another birthday. Yenna and I discovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about Ashenmere. It started with a child. Living, maybe 7 years old, with bright green eyes and an unfortunate tendency to see things others couldn't. Her name was Petra, and she found us in the chapel's library where we'd taken to spending our evenings. The walls are singing, she announced, tracking mud across the freshly cleaned floor. I looked up from the ancient ledger I'd been studying, a record of soul transactions from the early days of the Marrow Lord's reign. Walls don't sing, Petra. These ones do. She pointed at the eastern wall of the library, the one that had always seemed solid stone. There's something behind there. Lots of somethings. And they're all humming the same note. Yenna and I exchanged glances. Children who could see ghosts often had other sensitivities. And Petra had never been wrong before. We spent 3 days carefully removing the stones from the eastern wall. What we found behind it made me wish I still had breath to lose. It was a room. Small, circular, with walls covered floor to ceiling in names. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, carved into the stone in scripts ranging from the ancient Old Tongue to modern Common. Each name was paired with a date and a single word. Harvested. This is a record, Yenna whispered, her ghostly form flickering with emotion. Every soul the Marrow Lords ever took. Every person they murdered for immortality. But that wasn't the worst part. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on that pedestal sat a book. Not made of paper, made of something that looked like compressed ash and bone. Its cover bore a single symbol, a spiral consuming itself. I reached for it, and the moment my ethereal fingers touched the cover, memories flooded in. Not my memories. Not anyone's memories. But the city's memories. I saw Ashenmere as it had been, before the Marrow Lords. A beautiful city of white stone and flowing water, where people lived and died in natural rhythms. I saw the first experiments, alchemists and death priests working together, trying to extend life, to cheat the grave. And I saw the moment it all went wrong. One of the experimenters, a woman named Sereth Malakar, ancestor of the Lord we'd destroyed, had discovered something. The soul wasn't a single thing, but a structure. Layers upon layers, like an onion. And if you knew how to peel it carefully, you could extract those layers without destroying the core. At first, they'd used volunteers. The dying, the desperate, those who wanted to give their essence to loved ones. Noble intentions. But then Sereth had another realization. Souls from the young were more potent, more flavorful, she'd written in her notes, richer in essence. The volunteers became victims. The experiments became industry. And Ashenmere transformed from a city of life into a factory of death. Kael. Yenna's voice pulled me back. What did you see? I told her. All of it. And I saw her ghostly face harden with rage. We need to show this to the council, she said. Why? The Marrow Lords are already defeated. This is just. This is proof, Yenna interrupted. Proof that can't be denied or explained away. The lords who remain in the mountains, they claim they were justified, that the souls they took were criminals, volunteers, willing sacrifices. This proves they lied. This proves it was always murder. She was right. The book contained names, dates, causes of death. Young mothers killed in suspicious accidents. Children who'd disappeared from playgrounds. Elderly people who'd been reported dead of natural causes, but whose bodies showed signs of soul extraction. Evidence. Irrefutable evidence. We brought the book to the council. Lyris, who'd become one of the leading voices of the Waking Hollow, wept when she found her own name in its pages. Greaves found the names of 3 family members he'd thought had died naturally. The council voted unanimously. The book would be copied, distributed, made public. Every citizen of Ashenmere would know the true cost of the Marrow Lords' immortality. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. Living citizens who'd served the lords, guards, administrators, merchants who'd profited from the soul trade, faced trials. Some were guilty of active participation. Others had simply looked the way, chosen comfortable ignorance over uncomfortable truth. The trials lasted 6 months. Not trials of execution. The new Ashenmere had rejected capital punishment, but trials of exile and restitution. Those found guilty were cast out, forbidden from returning until they'd spent years serving communities they'd helped destroy. And the remaining Marrow Lords in their mountain fortresses? They received a message, carved in stone and delivered by an army of the Waking Hollow. We know your names. We know your crimes. We know what you are. You are no longer welcome in this world. Your immortality is your prison. Live forever, alone, watching the world you sought to rule forget you existed. Signed, the Free City of Ashenmere. Lady Vetherin sent one final reply, carried by a soul-bound raven that crumbled to dust after delivering its message. You think you've won, but you've only delayed the inevitable. Humanity fears death. That fear will always drive them to us. We'll wait. Centuries, if necessary. And when you've built your perfect society, when you think you're safe, we'll return. And we'll remind you why the living always lose to the eternal. I burned the message and scattered its ashes in the garden that had once been the grand ossuary. She might be right, Yenna said, watching the ash disperse on the wind. Fear is a powerful thing. So is hope, I countered. So is community. So is the knowledge that death doesn't have to be the end. It can be a transformation. We're proof of that. Living proof, Yenna said with a laugh. Or not living proof. Or whatever we are. We're proof that there's more than one way to exist, I said. More than just alive or dead. More than just mortal or immortal. We're something new. And so is Ashenmere. Coda, the Festival of Names. 10 years after the fall of the Marrow Lords, Ashenmere held its first Festival of Names. It was Petra's idea, now 17 and training to be a soul speaker, someone who could communicate with the dead and help them transition peacefully to whatever came next. We should celebrate them, she'd argued before the council. All the people whose names are in that book. They were stolen from life, stolen from proper death. The least we can do is remember them, honor them. The council agreed. For 3 days and nights, citizens, living, dead, and everything between, gathered in the streets to read names. Tens of thousands of names. Each one was spoken aloud, acknowledged, mourned. Candles were lit. Songs were sung. Stories were shared by those who'd known the named, or who'd woken as hollow and discovered their own names in the book. I stood with Yenna in the central square, watching as Lyris read from the book, her voice strong and clear. Marin Coldwater, harvested in the year 387, at age 23, taken by House Vetherin for the crime of refusing a labor contract. A candle was lit. Joss Blackthorn, harvested in the year 391, at age 16, taken by House Malachar. No crime listed. Another candle. Ceres Vel, harvested in the year 697, at age 19, taken by House Malachar under false promises of artistic immortality. This candle I lit myself, remembering Maven and her daughter, dissolved into light, finally free. The names continued. Hours became days. The living took shifts reading, their voices growing hoarse. The dead, those of us who'd chosen to linger, had no such limitation. We read through the night, every name a small act of rebellion against the lords who tried to erase them. On the final night of the festival, something unexpected happened. As the last name was read, a child named Pip Farstry, harvested at age 9 by House Nethermore for reasons unrecorded, every candle in the city flared at once. The light was blinding, warm, and filled with a presence I can only describe as gratitude. The souls we'd freed, the ones who'd moved on to whatever peace awaited beyond death, they'd heard. They'd been listening. And in that moment, they touched the city one final time, a blessing or perhaps just acknowledgement. We remember you too, the light seemed to say. Asterisk you who fought for us. You who refused to forget. Asterisk. And then the light faded, leaving only the gentle glow of 10,000 candles and the quiet murmur of 10,000 stories. Petra stood in the center of the square, tears streaming down her face. "Did you feel that?" she asked, looking at me with wonder. "They forgave us. They forgave the city for what was done to them." "Not forgiveness," I said gently. "Understanding. They understand that cities, like people, can change, can grow, can choose to be better than they were." "Will you stay?" she asked suddenly. "You and Yenna? You could move on too. Find your peace. You've done enough." I looked at Yenna, and she looked back at me. We'd had this conversation before, many times. We could move on. The pull was always there, like a warm current inviting us to let go, to drift into whatever came next. Not yet, I said. There's still work to do. Other cities like Ashenmere, still ruled by Marrow Lords. Other souls still trapped, still suffering. The Marrow thief rides again? Petra asked with a smile. The Marrow thieves, Yenna corrected, putting an ethereal arm around my shoulders. Plural. We're partners in this. Partners, I agreed. And so we stayed. Years turned into decades. Ashenmere grew and thrived. The Waking Hollow discovered how to create new souls, not through theft, but through a form of spiritual parentage, where willing dead could shepherd newly departed souls into consciousness, creating a new form of life. Children were born in Ashenmere who'd never known a world where the dead were slaves. They played with ghost children, learned from spirit teachers, and saw death not as an ending but as a transformation. Other cities, hearing of Ashenmere's success, began their own revolutions. The Marrow Lords' power crumbled across the continent. Some went quietly, their soul vaults opened and their immortality surrendered. Others fought and fell. Lady Vetherin was among the last. She held her mountain fortress for 40 years, sustained by hoarded essence and bitter determination. But in the end, even her stolen immortality ran out. She died alone, her body crumbling to dust, her soul fragmented from centuries of consuming others. No one lit a candle for her. As for me and Yenna, we kept our promise. We stole from death wherever we found it enslaving life. We freed souls, exposed corrupt lords, and helped cities transition from death-based economies to life-affirming ones. We became legends, in time. The Marrow thieves, the ghost liberators, the dead who walk for the living. But we never forgot what we really were. Two thieves who'd stumbled into purpose, who'd found that the greatest wealth wasn't what you could take, but what you could give back. And we never forgot Ashenmere, the dead city that chose to live again. On the 100th anniversary of the fall of House Malachar, Yenna and I returned to our old city. The Chapel of Silent Saints still stood, now a museum and library dedicated to the victims of the soul trade. We walked through streets filled with life, real trees growing from soil, not corpse-fed vines, children playing games that required laughter instead of silence, markets selling bread and flowers instead of marrow and bone. We did good, didn't we? Yenna asked, her ghostly form almost invisible in the bright sunlight. We did what we could, I said. That's all anyone can do. Are you ready? She asked then, and I knew what she meant. The pull was stronger now, the current inviting us onward. We'd held out for a century, staying when we could have moved on. But Ashenmere didn't need us anymore. The world didn't need us. It was time. Together, I asked, extending my hand. Always together, Yenna said, taking it. We walked to the garden that had been the grand ossuary, where flowers bloomed in every color imaginable. We sat beneath a tree that had grown from soil enriched by returned marrow essence, its branches heavy with white blossoms. And we let go. The current caught us gently, warmly. Memories flooded in, not just our own, but everyone's. Every soul we'd freed, every person we'd helped, every small act of kindness and rebellion. I saw Lyris teaching children to bake, Greaves building homes for the living and the dead, Petra guiding lost souls to peace, Maven and Ceres, reunited in whatever lay beyond, finally whole. I saw 100 cities freed, 1,000 souls liberated, a world slowly learning that death was natural, but enslavement was not. And I saw Yenna, my partner, my friend, my fellow thief, still grinning her rusty grin, still ready for one more job, one more impossible heist. "What do you think is next?" she asked as we drifted into the light. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever it is, I'm sure there's something that needs stealing." "Partners?" she asked one final time. "Partners," I confirmed. "In life, death, and whatever comes after." The light embraced us, and we were gone. But in Ashenmere, in the garden beneath the white-blossomed tree, a new flower bloomed. Blue petals shot through with veins of silver. It scent like fresh bread and old books and the particular satisfaction of a job well done. And if you listened closely, really closely, you could hear it singing. A song about thieves who stole from death and gave everything back to life. The end.